Origins and Discovery. The sun set slowly over the rolling hills of Bellwood, gleaming orange and crimson into the sky as if the heavens themselves had been torn open. Long shadows stretched across a quiet campsite nestled between thick pine woods and an empty stretch of highway that seemed to lead nowhere. Crickets sang in the underbrush. The air smelled of earth and gasoline. The Rust Bucket, a battered old RV held together by faded paint, stubborn hope, and more patches than original metal, sat silent beneath the dimming light. Its engine ticked softly as it cooled, like it too was catching its breath after the long day's drive. Inside, a young boy named Ben10 sat alone on the small fold-out bed, staring at the impossible thing wrapped around his wrist. It was green, metallic, alive. The circular face pulsed faintly, casting a ghostly glow against the thin walls of the RV. It hummed at a frequency too low to be heard clearly, yet strong enough to be felt, a vibration that traveled up his arm and into his chest like a second heartbeat. No one knew how it got there, least of all Ben. The summer had begun normally enough. A cross-country road trip with his cousin Gwen and their grandfather Max was supposed to be 3 months of boredom, fishing stops, roadside diners, and arguments over who got the window seat. Ben had packed comic books and handheld games, expecting nothing more than dangerous mosquito bites. Instead, something fell from the sky. He remembered that moment clearly, the streak of emerald fire cutting across the night like a falling star. He had run toward it out of curiosity, ignoring Gwen's warnings, pushing through brush and snapping twigs underfoot until he found the crater. The pod was half buried in scorched soil, metal twisted and hissing as if it had survived a violent birth. Smoke curled upward into the trees. Inside the broken casing, resting in a nest of alien circuitry, was the device. It had not looked threatening. It had looked abandoned. When Ben reached in and brushed the cool dial with his fingers, the world changed. The device leapt from the pod as if it had been waiting. It snapped onto his wrist with mechanical precision, tightening, sealing, fusing. He had clawed at it in panic, but it would not budge. The metal was warm now, responsive. Then came the surge. It was not pain, it was expansion, as if his body had been too small for something suddenly awakened inside him. Energy raced through his veins like liquid lightning. His bones felt elastic, his skin burned. Above him, unseen in the clouds, alien hunters tracked the pod's descent. They were not searching for a boy. They were searching for the weapon. Ben didn't understand that word yet. When the first threat descended from the sky, monstrous and armored, fear overtook him. His finger slammed down onto the glowing dial in desperation. The transformation was violent and magnificent. Light consumed him. His small frame stretched and ignited, reshaping into something tall and blazing. Fire replaced flesh. Rock replaced bone. His voice echoed differently, deeper, crackling like embers. He had become Heat Blast, a living being of flame, and somehow instinct guided him. He fought. He survived. But survival came at a cost. In the days that followed, whispers traveled through places Ben could not see, through alien frequencies, across interstellar channels, into dark corners of the galaxy. A signal had activated. The Omnitrix had bonded. A wielder had been chosen. Back in Bellwood, Ben tried to treat it like a game at first. 10 alien forms, superpowers on demand. It felt like stepping inside his favorite comic books. Until the first real consequences arrived. A building collapsed during a fight he mishandled. A civilian was injured, badly. The sight of blood against concrete silenced his excitement. For the first time, he understood that this was not a toy. Bellwood became his proving ground. Alleyways, rooftops, abandoned warehouses. Every confrontation tested not only his power, but his judgment. each transformation felt less like dress-up and more like a responsibility he hadn't asked for. As the moon rose on that first long night, Ben lay awake staring at the faint green glow in the dark. The device felt heavier now. He didn't know its name yet, not fully. The Omnitrix, a tool forged with cosmic intent, a library of... Unknown to Ben, the Omnitrix was never meant to land on Earth, and it was never meant for a child. Its arrival was not an accident of gravity, but the final move in a desperate cosmic calculation. The device was the culmination of ancient science, unbearable regret, and one being's attempt to correct a mistake so catastrophic it had scarred entire star systems. At its core sat an archive, not of time, not of knowledge, but of life itself. Encoded within its shifting lattice of green light were strands of DNA from millions of sentient species across the universe, mapped at the molecular level and stored in perfect stasis. Warriors, scholars, empaths, predators, civilizations that thrived, civilizations that no longer existed. The Omnitrix was a living vault. This immense genetic library was never designed to create soldiers. It was built as an ark, a failsafe against extinction. If a species vanished, its blueprint would survive within the watch, capable of restoration. It was hope reduced to code. The architect of this impossible device was Azimuth, a Galvan whose intellect dwarfed that of most sentient life. To his people, he was a visionary. To his critics, a dangerous idealist. To himself, he was a being trying to atone. Azimuth had once constructed something far more terrible, the blade known as Ascalon. It was not merely a weapon. It was a reality-shaping instrument, capable of rewriting matter on a planetary scale. In the wrong hands, it had reduced ecosystems to ash and turned thriving worlds into irradiated silence. Though Azimuth had not intended such devastation, intention meant little to the dead. Remorse reshaped him. If he could build something capable of ending worlds, he reasoned, then he could build something capable of saving them. Thus, the Omnitrix was born, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. Azimuth believed that conflict between species came from ignorance. If one being could become another, walk within their biology, feel through their nervous system, breathe through their lungs, perhaps empathy would follow. Perhaps war would lessen. It was a radical philosophy, peace through transformation. But even brilliance is not free from loneliness. Buried deep within the Omnitrix's quantum coding was something unspoken. Azimuth had lost someone, a mind equal to his own, a partner who left after witnessing the destruction Ascalon caused. The Omnitrix was not only repentance for the universe, it was a message, a demonstration that he had changed. If the device succeeded, perhaps she would return. Yet safeguards were necessary. If the Omnitrix were corrupted, weaponized, or merged with destructive intent, it could not be allowed to persist. So Azimuth embedded a failsafe, a hidden countdown tied to misuse and overload. Under extreme stress or forced recalibration, a hidden countdown could initiate. Dormant, silent, final. Should it ever reach 0, the Omnitrix would not simply explode. It would release a cascading genetic destabilization wave, powerful enough to fracture nearby space-time and sterilize planetary systems. A tragic irony, a device built to preserve life, capable of annihilating it. And others knew of its existence. Vilgax, warlord and conqueror, viewed the Omnitrix not as salvation, but supremacy, an infinite army contained in a single wrist. The secret interstellar network known as the Plumbers monitored its signal with uneasy vigilance, aware that Earth had become a beacon. Rogue xenobiologists dreamed of dissecting its code. Galactic courts debated whether such power should exist at all. Why Earth? Why a human child? Some believed it was miscalculation. Others suspected design. A theory whispered in distant systems suggested that the Omnitrix had chosen its host, detecting adaptability, genetic resilience, or something less measurable, potential. Ben felt none of this certainty, but sometimes, late at night, when static flickered through old radios in the rustbuck and the dial on his wrist pulsed without command, he sensed something deeper than programming. A presence, not conscious, but aware. The watch adjusted to him, learned him, and as he transformed again and again, rewriting his DNA in bursts of emerald fire, the universe recalibrated around a single, impossible fact. The arc had activated. Long before a boy found a watch in the woods, before alien DNA was cataloged into a fictional device, before children across the world shouted alien names into the air, there were 4 men sitting in a room trying to create something different. They would later be known as Man of Action Studios, a creative group formed by comic writers Duncan Rouleau, Joe Casey, Joe Kelly, and Stephen T. Siegel. They had worked in superhero comics for companies like Marvel and DC, and they understood something about myth-making. Power is easy to create. Consequence is not. In the early 2000s, Cartoon Network was searching for its next big original action property. Superheroes were resurging, sci-fi was growing, but the network wanted something that could compete in toy markets while still telling serialized stories. The industry truth, rarely discussed openly, was that animation at that level survives not just on ratings, but on merchandise. The original concept for Ben 10 was deceptively simple. What if a kid could turn into 10 superheroes? But early drafts were darker than what aired. In interviews, creators admitted the tone shifted during development. The watch was initially more mysterious, more alien, and less explained. The idea of it bonding permanently to Ben, something invasive and irreversible, remained intentionally unsettling. They wanted the transformation to feel powerful, but slightly frightening. Another lesser-known truth, the show was designed around escalation. The original series was never meant to end with childhood. From the beginning, there were discussions about aging Ben up, exploring what responsibility looks like when power is no longer a game. That evolution became Ben 10 Alien Force, where the tone noticeably darkened, the humor pulled back, stakes increased, death, war, and extinction were openly discussed. Behind the scenes, the franchise also reflected business risk. Action cartoons in the mid-2000s were declining in the U.S. market. Networks feared serialized storytelling might be too heavy for younger audiences. Yet, Ben 10 defied expectations, becoming one of the most profitable global franchises for Cartoon Network, expanding into films, toys, and international markets. There were tensions, too. Creative control shifted across seasons. Tone adjustments were made based on toy sales. Certain alien designs were altered for marketability. Some darker story arcs were softened to maintain ratings brackets. In animation, especially children's animation, art and commerce constantly wrestle. But perhaps the most fascinating hidden truth is this. The Omnitrix, a device containing DNA from countless species, mirrors the very structure of superhero comics themselves. Every alien form Ben becomes is essentially a different genre archetype: fire elemental, speedster, brute, intellect, monster. The show was quietly teaching children about transformation, identity fluidity, and empathy through biology. When Ben became another species, he experienced another way of existing. That idea, empathy through embodiment, is deeper than it first appears. And one final, rarely acknowledged truth. Ben 10 survived because it balanced power fantasy with limitation. The watch timed out, it malfunctioned, it chose randomly. Ben was never fully in control, and that frustration made the character human. In a media landscape where heroes often feel invincible, this vulnerability made him relatable. So while the in-universe story speaks of alien creators and cosmic devices, the real hidden story is about creators navigating corporate demands, evolving tone across years, and building a mythology strong enough to outlive childhood. The Omnitrix may not exist, but the idea behind it was carefully engineered, tested, reshaped, and protected by real people who understood that the best myths are not about power. They are about responsibility.